Welcome back to the Let's Go podcast, the podcast where we say let's go. Love God, live like Jesus, serve others, let's go. We want to connect you to the text, connect you to your calling, and encourage you as you live out your life as a disciple of Jesus. I'm here with Hunter and Juan, and we just want to jump right in today, Juan. So why don't you tell us, I mean, the Cowboys had a really good day yesterday.
Yes.
They really did well over the in-division rival, the Washington Redskins. Any thoughts on the game?
You know, that field goal, that I think that's his fifth 60 or more. That's
Brandon
like history.
Aubrey.
Yeah, Aubrey's insane.
Yeah.
And this last touchdown that Prescott did, it was like that's the 11th touchdown that has happened without turnovers. Hasn't happened since 1950. Isn't that insane?
That's just incredible. They had a great day. Hunter, your
You
thoughts
guys,
on
this is about the Bible, not about the Cowboys. And
Got him.
the Redskins.
I'm glad that you're here to bring us
Redskins aren't
back.
Redskins anymore.
I'm glad you're here to bring us back. That was a new segment called How'd the Cowboys Do Yesterday, and we're only going to do it if they win.
Okay, 3-3-1.
Yeah, We're really having a good season. You never know how the rest of the season
No.
could go.
To be clear, we're not having a good season.
You know,
3-3-1 is good. It's good for the Cowboys.
the last time they won a playoff game, they started off 2-3, so we still have hope. We're at that point of the season as Cowboy fans. Let's talk about Abraham. I thought that Hunter might have some stats like Juan did, but so we're
About
in
Abraham, he's 0 for 32 on fulfilling his side of the covenant. He cannot do it.
He can't figure it out. So this week, chapter 16, what could he not figure out, Juan? Why don't you give us a little glimpse into your message, how you the approach you took on this text?
Yeah, so the title that I gave the message was just God sees, Dios ve, and this idea that Jesus is seeing Hagar. Sarai, she wanted to kind of take control of the situation, waiting on this child to be born, and it's not happening. So she gives Abraham her slave, her servant Hagar, and Abram agrees, okay, yeah, sure, right? And after Hagar conceives, she kind of turns the table and starts kind of despising Sarai, and Sarai's really hurt. What do I do? Abraham tells her, do whatever you want to do with her, and starts mistreating Hagar, and Hagar just runs away, and she's like, it's not okay, right? I didn't ask for all this. And she runs away, and God comes to her, and the angel says, God's here, and gives her this promise of a great nation through her son, and Hagar just says, God is seeing me, God sees me. And just that beautiful story of God just looking at those who are marginalized, those who are outcast, and God says, I care for you as well. And I kind of turned that into this idea that Jesus is watching, is taking care of us. And, through the Hispanic, side of this, and the kind of being a minority type thing, you kind of feel marginalized, and I've gone through some racism and things like that. And that can cause, discouragement and God, why is this still a thing, And but God reminds us that even in the midst of all that, He's still there. He still cares, and His promises are always true, and we depend on that. So and how we treat others too it's important how we do as believers of Christ. So
yeah. Hunter, you focused on that as well. That was your fifth point.
Yeah,
to be clear,
that was the
that
fifth.
You made a joke about I should have just preached the whole sermon on point 5.
Or I should have had a 12-minute sermon that was that point, and everyone would have been a little bit happier. But I was thinking this morning about, and that's why we do this podcast, partly is so that we can share the things that we thought about on Sunday afternoon, and we were wrestling with after the fact, or people said to us, and so I made a deal about you don't get to mistreat people. Mm-hmm. And, Abram says, do whatever you think is best. And Sarah said, what I think is best is that I mistreat Hagar. And I was thinking about this, and in the context of the question of does God ever plan for bad things to happen to people or hard things to happen to people? And Hagar, doesn't wake up January 1st of this year, whatever year it is, and think, man, I'm hoping that I'll get pregnant with some man I hardly know's baby, and then get cast out and have to run away, and but God is the God who sees you when bad things happen to you, when good or bad people do bad things to you. God sees you, and He's with you, and He goes and He finds Hagar, and just how powerful of an image that is, that He is the shepherd that will leave the 99 to find the one. And God is cleaning up a mess that His people have made in His grace and mercy. And I just was thinking about that this morning, and how God is constantly doing that. And we live in a world where people are not always as kind as we wish that they would be. But we have a God that sees us when we are sitting in the hurt and the pain and the misery of the sins of others against us. So.
Yeah. One of the many descriptions of God, and as we think about being formed into the disciples of Jesus, one of the most common descriptors in all of Scripture for God is compassionate. That He's a God who is compassionate. That word appears, I believe, more than any other. We could check in on that. But if you want to be formed into who God has made you to be, being compassionate is at the top of the list. And your first point yesterday is like, if your plan involves hurting someone, then it's not God's plan.
Yeah.
What brought that phrase to mind for you? I thought it was a really great way to put that into perspective for folks.
Well, for me, it's Abraham's do with her whatever you think best. And then the next line is, and so Sarah mistreated Hagar. Yeah. And I was shocked by it. I was like, wait a second. Whatever you think best, boom, Sarah mistreats Hagar. And it's just, man, I just can't think of an instance in which God ever commands His people to mistreat folks.
And sometimes it's our go-to. You've hurt me, so I'm just going to hurt you right back. And I've seen that over and over. And I see it in the youth group. I see it in adults. It's just a thing that continues.
Yeah.
Our go-to. It's not okay.
Well, and I try to put myself in Sarah's shoes, and I said, well, she wishes she was pregnant. Hagar got pregnant. There's a little bit of jealousy. Like, we hurt people when we're jealous, and Hagar legally is not allowed to despise Sarah, and so she feels justified legally. My slave cannot despise me. That was an ancient Near Eastern a Code of Hammurabi law, is that a slave cannot despise their master, and so. And they're punishable in harsh ways. And so she's like, legally, I'm justified to do this or that. And then also, it's Abraham's responsibility, many would say, to help put Hagar in her place. And he says, hey, all I know is I'm having a baby. Like, I'm having an heir. This is the thing that we said we should do. And so, like, her family isn't where it wants to be. Her marriage isn't where it wants to be. And so she's kind of in this maybe whirlwind, this death flywheel of, you know what? I am so hurt. I'm going to hurt somebody else, and it just stands it flies so high in the face of love your enemy, even, or bless those that hurt you, or all that stuff.
One of the things in connection with all of this is a question I had in the text is, the angel of the Lord comes in verse 8 and says, where have you come from and where are you going? And she just says, I'm running away from my mistress. And so back to what Hunter was saying, is like, she's not in control of the situation. She's leaving this family. And it made me think, in this ancient Near Eastern context, what does that look like for a slave to leave the safety and security, even if she's under slavery, for fear of what? And so all of this, as we back it up, what does it all come to? It's like Abraham and Sarah decided, I want to take this, and I know that God has made us promise, but we're going to take this into our own hands. And it's a reminder that our sin has consequences that roll out.
Yeah.
And God, even in the midst of that, I think the beauty of this passage is that God finds the rollout of that sin, and He blesses it. Not to say that the sin was good, but the consequences of it, the woman who's running away and hurt, and this child she's about to have, God sees her, knows her, loves her, is compassionate to her. And so it's a reminder that our sin has consequence, but also that even if you're guilty of something, that God can work through the circumstances that your sin created and work them together for good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I thought of a children's book. I had a friend. He's really a friend of a friend. I don't know him that well, but he wrote this children's book called "The Moon Is Always Round," and the premise of the book and what happened was, they were gearing up to have their second child, and they have a little child, 2-3 years old, and they were getting that child excited. Hey, you're gonna have a sibling. You're gonna have a sibling. You're gonna have a sibling. He's gonna be so excited, and then they had a miscarriage. And they were, heartbroken and grieved, and they were processing. Well, how do we tell this our little son, who we were getting excited about to have a sibling, that we're having a miscarriage? And he wrote this book and illustrated it. It's called "The Moon Is Always Round," and so, and it's just a bunch of scenes of this kid looking up at the moon, and it's a half moon or a fraction of a moon. You can see a little bit of it, and the dad just keeps saying all along the way, "The moon is always round." And so you can only see a little bit of it, but it's always round. And at the end, there's the ending scene is them at this funeral service for the baby, and the sermon is, "The moon is always round," which means God is always good, and God will always do good and bring good. And for some reason, you just reminded me of that. Man, God is really good at cleaning up messes, and I think part of the let's go for us is let's be good at cleaning up messes as well, restoring people, reconciling people. But also, man, if we could just make a few less messes as the people of God, we might make it easier on all of us.
Yeah. Juan, let's move into kind of the later part of this and talk about this blessing, or this rather could be read as curse. Hunter talked on that a little bit. Did you spend any time kind of talking about this language that's in verses 11 through 12?
Yeah, in verse 12, I did hit a little bit. I just mentioned it briefly about the way that the translation of the word hostility, and it in other interpretations kind of like would talk about how he would live, hostility, or next to, or to the east of. But this idea that that these families, right, would be arguing, would be in conflict, and as we look at throughout the history of the Arab people and the Hebrews, and we've seen a lot of conflict, we've seen a lot of hostility, right? But again, it goes back to this idea of how we're treating each other, and how we view each other, and that even though we might have some hostility in those that are around us, loving thy neighbor, loving is the way Christ loved. When it was the lame, or the Samaritan, or the harlot, how did Jesus love all of these people that were in hostility, right, to his ministry, and the religious? I think it's very important how we love each other, and how that preaches and teaches.
Yeah, Hunter's point in this segment was, God is gracious to the outsider, and we ought to be too. It's interesting how you really spent some time, Hunter, on how do we translate these words. And I think that for some of us, we look at the scripture and we go, well, Pastor, it says he'll be a wild donkey of a man, and he'll be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he'll live in hostility. Clearly, this is an enemy. This is a curse. You really spent some time reshaping that, and I wonder if we might just talk about that a little bit, because there are intricacies to Hebrew here, and it's not to try and be anti or against the translators. The people that translate these scriptures know a ton about Hebrew, but it really is an important thing to mention, and I'm glad that you did, because this is a blessing, but it can be read as hostility and a curse towards the outsider, towards even Islam. And it's not a political thing. But it's tied to not current events, but events of the last 50 years, as you mentioned. And I thought I thought you dealt with it really well. And we just have to remember, like I encourage folks, Read when you read the Bible, like find different translations and read. And then when you see things are translated a little bit differently, maybe that just causes you a moment to kind of question and ask, did you read anything interesting about any of that? I mean, I know that you talked about it, so I was kind of curious to dig a little more if you had
Yeah,
any.
yeah. I don't feel the need to hash that out again. But the question is it a blessing or is it a curse? And for me, when I read the text, and I know the arguments particularly from Arab Christians, who will make the argument, no, this is translated poorly. And they talk about the hostility. It's really in the presence of or to the east of, and then the preposition against. Is it against or is it upon or is it over? And then what does it mean to be a wild donkey? Does that mean that he's just going to make a fool of himself, or that he's independent and free? But for me, there were two kind of grips of this. One is that Hagar does not interpret this as a curse. She's like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. You're the God who sees me." And I think that like that alone is a pretty powerful imagery. And I was thinking about it, and there is a third option, and the third option would be because what's true about us is we have been blessed so much by the promises and the salvation of Jesus, but that doesn't mean that everything's going to be a cakewalk, right? Doesn't mean that everything's going to be easier. And so it also could be, hey, this is a blessing, and parts of this are, hey, and there's going to be friction along the way because Ishmael was born outside of what the original intent for God and his people was. But God is so good, he's going to bless. And there's going to be a little bit of friction, but that's, for history to play out. Right. And you can see part of that. But, God doubles down on the blessing of Ishmael in chapter 21 when Ishmael is 13 years old. No, he's older than that at that point in 21, maybe 16 or 17, and Isaac's born. And God and he picks on Isaac, mocks Isaac, whatever this word is, and then Sarah's like, they got to go. And so Abraham asks God, and God says, I'll bless, and he reaffirms the blessing. I'm going to make him a great nation, and bless him. He's going to have 12 tribes, and the same thing, right? The same thing that Isaac gets. And it's fascinating to me, and it's not a curse, but what kind of blessing it is the question. And I want us to see the ways in which the Bible can accidentally be interpreted through our modern lens.
Right.
And this is certainly one of those ways that I've wrestled with a lot in the last 7 days on it.
Right. Well, I thought that it was profound that you brought that to our attention. So let's spend the last several minutes just sort of pondering over this sort of overarching theme of the text, and you can touch on some things that you didn't really get to, Juan, if you would like. But the God who sees me, really a profound point of this entire text, and it is her response to this blessing. What does it mean for us to live out our faith, keeping in mind that God is the God who sees us?
So as we walk, our faith, truly living our faith, you mentioned it's not a cakewalk. Having faith in our walk when we face storms and even persecutions, like how truly are we standing for what we're believing in? I think of mission people like that are in like China and these countries where Christianity is, looked down upon, and the thing is that God is there, and He's seeing them, and it's easy for us to say, yeah, God's here, God's seeing me, because we've got it easy. We've got it nice. And I even talked to the youth on Sunday morning about that. It's just like, are you truly living what you're saying you are, who you're saying you are? And the thing is, like, as we walk, we are remembering that God sees us, and when we truly live our faith, and when we are preaching who we are, it's a beautiful life to live, and to know that there is blessing in that, and there's encouragement to know that He's there.
Right. It seems that Hagar is in this moment of feeling unseen, uncared for, and
to be quite literal, nobody sees her. She is
Right.
completely alone. Nobody knows where she is. She has no family. She's got nobody.
And so in a context now, I think of times in my life where I've experienced even seasons of heightened anxiety or depression, or folks that have gone through hard things, folks that are going through grief. We're coming up on the holidays. This is just there's a lot of moments in life where it can feel like no one sees you, and I think this text reminds us that God sees you, and He's chasing after you. Even if you're the one of the 99, He's chasing after you, and He sees you. He knows you're hurt, but He also sees you, and He knows your joy, and He sees you, and He knows your celebration, and you can't run from God, and that is just a truth that at times is hard to wrap your mind around. That He can be the omnipotent God that sees all and knows all. And that even means in the moments where you feel the most unseen, that He's close to the brokenhearted. He's near to us. He's compassionate with us. And I do agree. I think, Hunter, you could preach the whole sermon on point 5 from yesterday, but how do we put that on every day? Is that you get out of bed and you know that God is with you.
Yeah.
God is with you. And whatever circumstances come that day, that you walk in some power when you know that truth.
And we live in a world that is lonelier than ever, right? Like that's the moniker of the world today. And we're lonely, and we feel like nobody gets me, nobody sees me. And people aren't as comforted as they ought to be by the God sees you comment, right? It's like, yeah, well, God, like who is God? What is God? And they have this view of God that's a very hands off to the side, just kind of, hey, good luck over there, God. But He's in the mess, and and He has the power. Whatever you need to do, He has the power to do it if you would ask Him and trust Him with that. And for me, whenever I think through this idea, and it's something that I say, every 3 or 4 weeks, is that the biggest burden for a lot of us is that we haven't forgiven ourselves for things that God has forgiven us for. And He sees those things, and He has forgiven you of them. And so you have got to, you've got to seek reconciliation and forgiveness and apologize. You also need to move on from your past sin and shame and move forward in new life. And you're like, oh, I've been made new, I've been baptized, I pray my prayers and all this stuff. But man, if you're still living in the pain of the past, then you are quite literally not moving into the future, because you're stuck in the past. And, and I say that with also, like, people need to take responsibility for things they've done and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But also, man, if you could just today live the way the Lord has called you to live, and trust Him with your past, then you live a whole new life, literally.
Yeah.
So,
Well, praise God. Well, this week we're going to be doing Genesis 17. We have one service on Sunday at 8:30 in the morning. Hunter's going to be preaching, and we'd encourage you to come to that so that you can stay connected to our Abraham series at 8:30, and then go to Church 2.0, which will be at the high school for Love Thy Neighbor community service. We're really looking forward to that. It was just such a great blessing last year. It's going to be another great week this week. Pastor Billy Gurley is preaching. Don't know what he's preaching on, but I'm sure it's going to be good. Do you know?
Keys to the Kingdom.
Keys to the Kingdom.
Yeah, he's preaching on us living in agreement with one another. We need to agree as a community on the person of Jesus and His authority for our life, and that we want to see the will of God, the kingdom of heaven on earth, as it is in heaven here in Athens. And if we could agree on those things, then the gates of hell could not prevail against our agreement. And so powerful text. If you could only do one service, which I know you can do both, but if you could only do one, I would recommend just to go to the high school and support the community service. In Genesis 17, we'll be talking about the covenant of circumcision and baptism and
Well, that's really going to entice people to come.
all that kind of stuff. So
to come to the 8:30.
I would say you can listen to parts of that while you go for a walk at some point this week,
Yeah.
but go to the service at the high school at 11 a.m.
And I know the worship's going to be fantastic at the high school. So it was last year, and God's going to move, so it's going to be good.
So thanks for joining us today for the Let's Go podcast. We'll send it off at this point and just stay around here. Love God.
Live like
And
Jesus.
serve others.
Let's
Go.
Vamos.
Vamos.
Thanks, guys.